بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
Thank you very much. My name is Sadiq Warfa. I am the Executive Director of Fagaaraha and the Chairperson of the Venjura Village and Community Leader. The Somali term Fagaaraha can roughly translate to English as a town hall meeting. In the days long before the Somali Civil War, people of the villages will gather under a large tree led by elders and wise people of the village. They will discuss issues and make joint village decisions. In the colonial times, leadership styles were modified, and during the Civil War, these established ways of communicating were abandoned. Here, in the United States of America, many Somali elders who live in the scattered high-rise apartments and in the Venjura village participate in resident council in the Venjura village, which they discuss issues and make decisions, not unlike the old ways, but under the rules of direction of Minneapolis housing authorities. Many Somali people have hunger for discussion related to the homeland politics and economic development. We established the Fagaaraha as a means to host these talks and discussions, bringing in scholars and learned people to lead discussions. We hosted 21 Fagaaraha, 21 town hall meetings in Minneapolis, Columbus, Ohio, Ottawa, Canada, Amsterdam, Netherlands, Nairobi, Kenya, and the homeland of Somalia. These meetings have been largely conducted in Somali language. Tonight, we are focusing on an American issue, prompted by upcoming political election for President of the United States. Republican candidates have repeatedly spoken out in relation to the ISIS crisis, grabbing daily headlines and connecting the radical Islam with Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab. In our native Somali and neighboring Kenya, in our community, there have been new reports about ISIS and Al-Qaeda Shabaab recruits joining from Minnesota. Despite growing Islamophobia here in Minnesota and elsewhere, there has been little public concern raised in very neighborhood where many Muslims live or is part. This is what Ted Cruz has said. So we can no longer surrender to the enemy through political correctness. We need to empower law enforcement to patrol and secure Muslim neighborhoods before they become radicalized. This is what he said. We need to secure the southern border to prevent terrorist infiltration, and we need to execute a coherent campaign to utterly destroy ISIS. The days of United States voluntarily surrendering to the enemy to show how progressive and enlightening we are in part and end. This is what he said. So tonight, it's our hope. Tonight we can contribute to the dialogue, understanding the issues around miscategorizing Islam in general, immigrant and refugee Muslims in particular in Minnesota neighborhoods, as a place needing surveillance and patrolling. So tonight, as a community, compromised, numerous Muslims, non-Muslims, we take this opportunity to respond by talking to one another, and widely commune with our views on this situation and what we want to have happen as a result of our peacemaking and community building activities in advance. And we thank you for coming tonight. So let me say what this gathering means tonight. We want to discuss the issues that is affecting us, our community. We have elected officials. We also have Minneapolis Police Department are here tonight. Lieutenant Gary Nelson is here, Officer Mukhtar, Officer Ali, and Officer Maulid. Welcome, please.
I kind of wanted to get this going because I am not Muslim, but I live in this neighborhood, and I felt that all of us have to speak out on issues such as this. And since we have been working diligently to bring many, many people together to build a community of many voices, many faces, many cultures, many languages, that this is the kind of issue that we should be doing. Now, I realize that most of the Fagaaraha forums have been on issues related to Somalia. And so I asked Sadiq, I said, can we have one that is in English and that is speaking to a domestic issue here? Now, probably a lot of us do not believe that the one or more of these Republican candidates will be elected to president, but we still have to consider all the options. And if we haven't spoken among ourselves, how can we speak to the rest of the country? And I can't expect somebody in a small town in Missouri to speak for Minneapolis. They do not have a population such as we have here.
Good evening. Again, my name is Gary Nelson, and I represent the 3rd Precinct here, the Minneapolis Police Department. I do have a letter here that was presented to me by the Chief of Police of Minneapolis, and I'd like to read it. She was invited to tonight's program. The letter says, Mr. Sadiq Warfa and community members, I thank you for the invitation to participate at the Friday, April 8th, Fagaaraha Town Hall meeting and apologize that a previous commitment prevents me from joining you. Even though I am unable to attend, I want to assure you that we, the Minneapolis Police Department, value the many partnerships we have with the Somali community and that we will continue to work together with a common goal of making Minneapolis a safe place for all who call it home. As is signed, sincerely, Chief Janae Harto with the Minneapolis Police Department. And Sadiq, I want to leave this letter. She wanted me to give this to you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I will just echo the Chief's comments that the Minneapolis Police Department values the diversity in our communities. And we have a very vibrant and diverse community, whether it's difference in religions, difference in cultural backgrounds, you know, many differences in perspectives. But, you know, when it comes to this particular issue that this meeting here tonight, you know, pertaining to Islamophobia or specific remarks that Senator Cruz stated, that I would caution that there is much political rhetoric being said right now. I think those remarks are rhetoric. With the Minneapolis Police Department, we value the rule of law in this country. We value constitutional principles, and any notion that the Minneapolis Police Department would be engaging in any type of surveillance or investigations on anybody from any community based on their religious beliefs or their cultural background is just not going to occur. That is not something that we believe in. That type of activity, in our view, would be unlawful, and we would rather work with communities such as the relationships that we have with specifically here with the Somali community and with the broader Muslim community in Minneapolis. We will continue to strengthen those relationships, and we think that that is really the future here on having understanding and working collaboratively to solve public safety issues that are real, that impact everybody that lives, works, or visits the city of Minneapolis. So again, thank you for inviting the Minneapolis Police Department to discuss this matter, which I know is a very important and serious matter to everybody here in the room.
And majority of my time, I worked at City Riverside neighborhood, and which is located at 1st Precinct. As Lieutenant Gary Nelson said, you know, just want to make sure that you guys make it clear to you, all of you, that on what the Islamophobia and the rhetoric that you guys are just, you know, familiar with. I can understand the concern from you guys having a background of coming from Somalia, being born in Somalia and living under the direction of a dictatorship I mean, when a president and a government who's dictator or tyranny, you know, how they used to, you know, dictate over people as far as, you know, what was freedom of religion like back home. I can understand that concern from you, because religion, freedom of religion over here and over there is a lot different. And so, one more time, you know, there is a constitutional rights that you guys have that protect you from those kind of things. And the rhetoric that you guys are hearing, you guys, it is just rhetoric. So, but coming from back home, and for myself being a Muslim and coming here, I share the background and, you know, the concern with you guys. But I want you guys to understand that so many of Somali Americans that fled to other countries and experience it under different governments and have different rights from, you know, become citizens from different countries. I want to, you guys know with me, having even relatives from relatives and other people that went to other countries, we call each other every day. I call my relatives in Africa or Middle East or Europe or other places. They become citizens over there. So we call each other, we say, what is it like to be a citizen in that country? And we know what is it like to be an American citizen here. It's a lot different. All the rights we have here, and being American, you guys know we are really the luckiest one from all of other people that left from even Middle East or other African places. The rights of freedom of religion we have is the one we're proud of it, and we're lucky to have that. So for me, being an officer on the street, working with Minneapolis police, I can assure you that you guys, you have your own freedom of religion and your rights, and nobody's gonna take it away from you. And we built a good relationship with the Somali community, starting 8 years ago when they first have the first Somali officer. Today we have almost 10 sworn and non-sworn Somali Muslim Americans who work for the city of Minneapolis.
In this, so I apologize. I want to talk about the formation of Minnesotans against Islamophobia, because there was a national call that went out to respond to some of this rhetoric, and with all due respect to the officers, if this was directed against another group, it would be intolerable. So, I mean, I do think that we have to respond. And so a coalition came together really just because there was a week of action called to respond to the escalating rhetoric and the dangers that it poses for our Muslim brothers and sisters. And so this week of action was called for February 13th to the 20th. And locally, we gathered to plan an event on February 20th, which was very successful. But the group decided to stay together and continue to work because we realized that here in our local community, we have a number of Somali residents who are threatened by this rise in Islamophobia, and specific that are not local police programs, to be fair. They come out of Homeland Security and the Countering Violent Extremism program, and a new one called Strong Cities Initiative. The Countering Violent Extremism program is in 3 cities across the country: Boston, LA, and the Twin Cities. Why is that? Because we have a large Somali population. So I do think it's fair that the Somali Americans are concerned about this. And I am personally concerned about this. I think that the programs are in our schools. They are having teachers on the lookout for radicalization. What they consider radicalization, I would have just considered identifying with your religion. I was quite identified with my own religion. I'm Jewish. I was quite identified with my religion as a teenager. I was quite taken with Israel when I was a teenager. I've come away from that in my work with the Palestinian community, but I was very smitten, and I can only imagine what a program like CVE would have thought of me if it was targeting the Jewish population, which would have been equally possible. Jews are about 1% of the population of Minnesota. Muslims are about 1% of the population in Minnesota. But of course, as an Ashkenazi Jew, I have white skin, and Israel is an ally. Those are the main differences. Otherwise, Jewish radicalization, Jewish identification with Israel, a willingness to go fight and die in a foreign country, this is just as true of young Jews growing up to identify with what we are told is our homeland. And in our case, it's not true. I was born and raised here, as many young Somalis were, and my family comes from Russia and Hungary, so Romania, not Israel. So Israel is not my homeland, but I was trained to identify with it as my homeland and to be willing to go and fight and die there. So I don't think any of what's called radicalization is really at all abnormal for youth who want to belong and feel a part of something. So to surveil these communities, to teach teachers that women who start to wear the hijab, they've identified the hijab as a passive form of terrorism. That's a white paper, right, Jelani, a military white paper? So that to me is pretty scary.
You know, I have the honor of representing many East Africans, many Somali and other folks over at the state capitol, and it's just good to know that when this kind of threat comes forward that we can come together. And I took your instructions to write down some words, so I'll read them to you. And I just want to say, in addition to these words, we are doing some work at the state capitol to try to bring resources to particularly to the Somali community. There's some great organizations that have been coming over to try to make sure that we can provide more resources for the youth, resources for the elders, and in general really honor the contributions and the needs within the Somali and East African communities. So I'll read what I wrote that I'll put on the wall. I guess, where are we putting them on the wall? Right there, okay. So what I wrote is, the Islamophobia of Ted Cruz is totally unacceptable, shameful. His words are hateful and should not be allowed to divide or frighten us. Instead, I am honored and proud to celebrate the presence of our many Muslim neighbors in South Minneapolis. They have made our neighborhoods safer and richer, stronger, and more diverse. You can count on me to stand with you in solidarity and in peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Unfortunately, we've used the wrong language in the countering violent extremism. We did put an appropriation into this public safety bill last year, and the language that I used in talking about it was this was not to be used for surveillance, it was not to be used for police activity, it was to be used for the kind of encouragement of helping young students, of having programs that would be helpful to the Somali community. Now, besides talking to young students, I've also been talking with some of the Somali elders in my area. One of the things we're talking about is trying to get a goat farm going in Minnesota. Apparently all the goat meat that's available in the Somali community is imported from Australia. And it's about time we started doing some of these things ourselves. Maybe not in the city, maybe just outside of the city, but looking to the new cultures we have to supply new experiences for us. We're rewriting the language of the appropriation that we did so that we specifically are talking about economic development. We're talking about activities like the Kajug group. I don't know if people here know about Kajug, but it's a group that works with art and with physical activity and so forth, with Teams for Youth. There was a fantastic play that was funded by a Kajug, and I was very proud to get the appropriation to Kajug in last year into the appropriations, legacy appropriations bill. And the play is called The Chronicles of the Diaspora. The performance I went to was totally sold out, so I hope they'll redo it. It's about Somali families in Minneapolis with young people that are becoming much more Americanized, and how they deal with their older people in their family. The play also went to St. Cloud and to Rochester, and apparently people heard about it, and it's been invited to California, Colorado, and somewhere in the Southwest. It's a terrific play, and we need to see it more in this in our community now. So we're trying to get, we have several bills that are asking for funding for specifically to help with Somali culture and to help with activities and so forth. And one of the interesting things is that even the Republican legislators have suddenly noticed that there are enclaves of Somalis in their community. So the bill, which I've signed on to as a co-author, which was heard this past week in the Ways and Means Committee, is offered by a Republican legislator. And the legislators in Rochester and St. Cloud are taking attention. So hopefully it won't be just Karen and I working for these things. We're going to have support from our colleagues throughout the state. So thank you for inviting me, and salam alaikum.
Islamophobia is a society problem. It is not a Muslim problem. And I say, and this is a line not from me, but some great leader some time ago said, the greatest fear is fear itself. And just to explain to you what the word Islamophobia really means, what are we talking about in today's context? Islamophobia is this irrational fear. Irrational because it's coming from stereotyping, it's coming from ignorance, and then that leads to discrimination. That leads to harassment, that leads to hatred, and that leads to excluding Muslims from civic and social life. And we're starting to see that not only in the effort or the loud mouth of some political leaders, but really we're starting to see it in the grassroots level of our society and our communities. Yesterday, I spent the entire day in central Minnesota. I spoke to a group of students and community leaders and at Central College Lake in Brainerd, Minnesota. Most of you, if you have a chance to go, Brainerd is right in the central of Minnesota. I met some people in Little Falls, and then I gave a presentation in the morning, and then also an evening discussion at a church. And the morning presentation was about Islamophobia, about Muslims, but the room was tense. We had the local police there in Brainerd, we had security there, we had from the school, and there were a lot of people in that room who wanted to hear the message. But there were also a lot of people in the room that felt that my message was not accurate, that they were intimidated, that they felt what I was saying was deceiving the people. And so that room, I could feel that tension now, not only here in the Twin Cities, but across the United States. So dialogue is the number one and most important way we can learn a lot about each other. And I think I encourage that, and I encourage those who may hear about this message, that the best way we get to know each other is when we actually have a dialogue, a discussion, and a conversation. There are incidents that have happened. Most of you have heard about it. The Esma Jama, who was a victim of a hate crime, and she was attacked for speaking Somali, and this is the call to the prayer. she was attacked. She was not the only victim of that kind of a hate crime. There was a Muslim family that were held at gunpoint. And there was a man from Minnesota who burned the only Muslim business in Grand Forks, North Dakota, which was actually owned by Somalis. And so we have incidents happening in the community, but I want to just talk about 3-4 things about Islamophobia that most people perceive to be or have a wrong understanding of. Number one, it's not just about education. It's not about just lack of ignorance. There's a lot of people who just have hatred and racism, and we are talking about that every single day in our society. And Somalis, at least the largest East African community here, we fit 3 unique profiles. We are a new immigrant community, so we're still learning a lot of things of how things work. So we struggle with that identity, as well as also we are African Americans, and the conversation about African Americans is still existing today. And just a few days ago, there was a discussion about disparities, and I was talking to Phyllis about Dr. King's dream. You know, most people know the "I have a dream" speech, but that was not the speech that Dr. King was giving that day. He intended to give that scream. He was planning to give a prosperity, as economic justice, because that was the issue that he recognized. That was going to be the biggest struggle. But yet, because it was a large crowd, and there was actually a singer who heard his "I have a dream" speech before and said, you know, say that "I have a dream" speech. So he switched it and he gave the most famous speech that most people recognize. So the racial disparities is huge, and the Somali community in Minnesota are struggling. Actually, one of the worst disparities that this community is struggling. So I encourage Representative Clark and Phyllis to recognize it's not about the threat of 20 kids leaving ISIS that we need to talk about. We need to talk about the larger disparities that this community is facing, which we need those resources for. I want to also just mention the other point about who is pushing Islamophobia. It's not just coming from few people who are ignorant. There is a business behind it. There's an actual business behind it. And there's people who are coming to Minnesota and lying and creating this polarizing environment. And they're called Islamophobes. And there are people who there's a guy named Usama Dakduk. He was just recently here. He's been talking, and he's been going to northern Minnesota, speaking to large crowds, saying things like, you know, Muslims think about killing you is a small matter to Muslims. These are the type of conversations that Minnesotans are hearing that we need to obviously filter, that we need to challenge. Islamophobes are big, but now also the active organizations, people who are organizing. But also there's a false thought. People think that you know, Islamophobia is also just coming from the right wing, right? It's the Tea Party, it's the crazy people on the right. But the reality is on both sides. It's coming from the left and the right. And the inherent question, or the subtle question that Islamophobia drives, is that there is something inherently wrong with Islam. And that is absolutely something we cannot accept as Muslims. So it's something that is definitely important. So I encourage all of you to learn, to really think about spreading the dialogue. And a lot of people ask me, a lot of times, they ask me this one question. They say, how are the Somalis assimilating? And the first response that I always tell them is, have you actually had a conversation with a Somali? Right? We need to have conversations. We need to talk to each other. And you realize actually most of the Somali kids here that you see, they're born and raised here.
So we are in between two extremists. One big mistake that they do, Cruz and Donald Trump, is they always align Islam with the radicals, which is not true. Islam is a religion. And this religion of Islam is coming from God. And God said in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. So very clear, in the Quran, indeed, we made you, talking about the Muslims, nation of balanced and fair and moderate. This is opposite of radical. And all the Islam are two pillars. Like, or you can say like the whole Islamic religion talk about two pillars. If I talk these two pillars, it takes hours, but two pillars only in Islam. Bring me every verse of the Quran. I will challenge everyone. And bring me every tradition of Prophet or saying of Prophet Muhammad. I will show you it is under one of the two. That's it. That's what I'm trying to conclude with my speech tonight. Only two things. The whole Islam. Quran, the first primary source of Islam, the book of the Holy Book, and the tradition of Prophet Muhammad. They both talk only two things. Number one, jalbul masalih, to benefit for the humanity. Is that clear? That's number one. Whatever benefits to the humanity is Islam. You get that, number one, right? Number two, Islam talks, the first one in Arabic is jalbul masalih, means benefiting to the humanity. And number two is dar al-mafasid. Dar al-mafasid means what? Preventing or stopping or blocking all harms, any harm from anyone. Those are the Islam. Whatever Prophet Muhammad did day one, when he was sent as mercy for the humanity, he talked to the people, he said, I am bringing any benefit that I can explore to the humanity, and I'm here to prevent and stop any harm to the humanity. So that's the Islam. Bring me any verse of the Quran, it talks only those two. So I want the one who's saying like even war in Islam or jihad in Islam, the Prophet listed 10 commandments that when they go to war, the army of the Muslims, they protect, listen very careful, women, children, elders, and he listed anybody who's worshiping, no matter what faith, and wherever they are worshiping, protecting the plants, trees, all human beneficial materials, like today is like water, electrical means, and all this. And then the Prophet said, not only that, all types of the mutilation of the human being is prohibited. Burning of the human being is prohibited. It's list, long list. They never talk about this. This is war. If you look, I have a Juris Doctor of Law. I studied law of war in the United States. If you look like all ethics or war-related rules in the United States today, and you compare war-related in jihad, you will see more humane the one listed in the jihad. Even to the level of the person, the Muslims cannot run after the person who run from the war. Cannot arrest him, cannot kill him, cannot injure him, cannot do anything. This is like a misunderstood religion. So that's why, Sadiq, thank you very much. This dialogue is necessary, and I ask Sadiq to have more English dialogue with the neighbors. I'm from St. Paul. We have very good relationship with our St. Paul, with our police. I'm member of the, I and Kasim, my assistant, we are member of the advisory council of the chief's office. And we are like, we have natural names, which is peace officers in our area. To the level of the chief said, that area belongs to Dawah Mosque. Anything happens, we will ask them. This is to the level of the trust. We need to build that trust. Once you have the trust between community and the police, I'm telling you, no harm will be happening. Come to our neighbor, Masjid Dawah, and ask when was the last time they heard about the bullet. They will tell you. By the time this Islamic Dawah moved to our area, that was the last time. Before there was violence, drugs, gang, street kids running away, violence, killing, all this. White, Hmong people, everybody will tell you we are blessed with the Islamic Da'wah, and that's the true Islam, peace, harmony, living together, loving each other for the peace. And the Prophet said this, it's very important. May Allah send to the hellfire and curse him whoever harms his neighbor. Look what the Prophet said, alayhi salam. My neighbor, I have to protect them. I am the shield, no matter what faith they believe. I have to shield them. This is Islam. Jibril, angel Jibril came to the Prophet, said 3 times, your neighbor. The Prophet said, what? Your neighbor. He said, what? Your neighbor. Until the Prophet said, I thought he will say eventually, even if you're deaf, after your death, they will inherit you and your wealth. What he kept saying, protect your neighbor. You protect your neighbor. This is faith, my dear brothers and sisters. I want to say, my lieutenant and others, it's part of the faith to protect each other. So sometimes you don't need. So if you have one bad apple, that intending, that does not count as a part of Islam and the Muslims. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. We don't have time for the translation.
Lieutenant Nelson, I just want to ask you, on the Minneapolis police officers, there's recent comments by someone who advised Ted Cruz made, no-go zone Minneapolis. If you can just, say something about Minneapolis, there is any neighborhood that is where there's a no-go zone?
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I had heard that comment was made by an advisor of his, I think within probably the last 48 hours. And it was, I was shocked to hear it. No, there is no such thing in Minneapolis. Our police officers feel very comfortable in all parts of our city, responding to all areas, regardless of the folks that are living in those particular areas, and I think it's really because of the relationships that we work very hard to build and strengthen with all of the residents in our community.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anigu su'aal badan ma qabo, waxaan la yaabay ninka aabihii awowgii boordarka soo jabiyeen ee sharci la'aan dalka ku soo galay kolkuu dhashay inuu yidhaa madaxtinimaan u tartami isagoo highway patrol ahaan jiray uu yidhaaho islaamka waxaan ku xidhayaa calaamad lagaga garto dadka kiristankii ku garto waa arrin aad loola yaabo. Sharciyan baan ku soo gallay annagu, waan sharciyaysannahay, waxaan nahay dad Maraykana oo islaamu Ameerikii baa la yidhaa, budaa joogta, diin walbo adduunkaa joogta. Waxa annaga maaragtay uu ninkaasi tartanka uu islaamka ugu galay ee gabdhaha annaga iyo carruurtanadii dhiganaya iskuullada ay hesitationku ugu dhacay, baqitaan baa ku dhacay. Saas aabay hadman dhoofnaa ma iskaga cararaa dalka, gabadh baa i weydiisatay tigidhii goobay tiri aan carare intuuna ninkaasi soo bixin. Marka waxaan codsanayaa oo booliska iyo ka codsanayaa dawladda in apologize ay bixiyaan ninka baarlamaanka Mareykanka madaxda ka ah islaamka waa inuu apologize siiyo oo maaragtay Cruz wuxuu samaynayo apologize na laga siiyo.